Paul. Dr. Paul, the former congressman and presidential candidate. Do you like that word former before your name? Is that feeling good right now?
That sounds pretty good. It's always great to graduate, you know, and improve your stature.
Are you missing Congress?
No, but I did write a little thing the other day that I sort of missed being at the hearing when Bernanke was before the Financial Service Committee. I didn't get to ask him a question, so I got to ask a rhetorical question in a little article I wrote.
So now you're doing radio commentary and you're doing speeches, and you know, there's so much going on and you were very vocal 10 years ago, and again on the 10th anniversary of the Iraq War, that you're one of the few people in Congress, and particularly one of the few Republicans, I think there were 7, who spoke out against it at the time. Do you feel vindicated now that you had the right position back then?
Yeah, it's sort of, I hate to use that word vindicated, sort of like I did it and all that. I think it's tragic. I'm so sad about it. There were actually 6 of the Republicans and, of course, more of the Democrats. But then again, it was a Republican war, so most Republicans went along with it for that reason. But there's only one of those members of this is still in Congress, and that's Jimmy Duncan. So at the time, there were 3 that were considered moderate liberal Republicans and 3 of us that were considered more conservative.
It's really remarkable that it's 10 years later and we're still there, although combat troops are gone, but we have spent trillions of, I don't even know what we've spent in terms of treasure and how many people have been killed who are civilians, which is a greater number, it seems, than those who are were in fighting forces. That's
right. It's well over 8,000. There were 4 active military people that got killed and contractors. They don't report the people that get killed. But it is a mess. Not only is it hard to add up all the costs, because many have now calculated into the many trillions of dollars, but the long-term consequences of these individuals coming home with lost limbs and all kinds of disorders and very, very inefficient veteran benefits, it's a real mess. But even today, it's so tragic, and it's a reflection of the foreign policy, because we have our Secretary of State over there threatening the government that we imposed, or that we put into power, the Maliki government, and saying, don't you dare allow your Iranian friends to fly over Iraq. Because we more or less have turned that country over to a Shiite-oriented group which allies themselves with Iran. And, of course, it's mischief, and it'd be best not that they send any weapons into Syria, but the whole thing is when does it ever stop? And the policies backfire. So we work this hard to go in and get weapons of mass destruction, get the Al-Qaeda. Now there's weapons of mass destruction still all over the place. We have a country that's allied with the Iranians, and there was never any Al-Qaeda, and the Al-Qaeda's all over.
Were we better off with Saddam Hussein in power?
Actually, probably so. I mean, that's about the only thing they can say. Well, we killed Saddam Hussein. We killed Saddam Hussein. But was it worth 8,000 Americans and a couple 100,000 Iraqis and hundreds of thousands, if not million people displaced? No, I think the cost was way too high. But people trap you into that question and say, oh, okay, that means you like Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, no, I've said the same thing. I think we were better off. Not that I like Saddam Hussein, but I've said the same thing. He was a bulwark against Iran. Now we have a Maliki who is friendly with the government of Iran. We still have the Shiites, the Sunnis, and the Kurds at each other's throats. You've got a very disgruntled group of Shiites, as you point out, or Sunnis rather, who are no longer in power. So I mean, it's an interesting judgment call.
Yeah, I think, one thing that we don't talk about here in this country is probably the underlying conflict over there is a religious civil war between Sunnis and Shiites, and that's ongoing. And here we introduced all these extra factors of, punishment for terrorism and oil and these many other things. But I think the reason why the the problems are never solved and made worse is this constant bitter religious war that's going on, and then we get in there and we just stir the pot and we suffer the consequences. So the thing I wrote this week, enough is enough. We got to quit.
The other things before that's certainly part of the public dialogue right now is gay marriage. You just had Senator Warner change his position on that. The state of Ohio now is pro-gay marriage. 53% of Americans versus what it was 9 years ago, something like 37%. What's your position on that?
Well, I don't change my position. I can't say never, but no, I'm going to keep my same position. I have my definition of marriage, and I follow that, and, that is what I think is best. At the same time, I don't want the government involved. I think this big fight to go to the Supreme Court to really argue over the definition of marriage, and my definition is this, theirs is this, I don't want to impose my definition on anybody else. Nobody else should tell me what they think marriage should be and impose it on somebody else, which means, why do we have a license to get married? If we didn't have a license, maybe we wouldn't even have this argument.
Yeah.
And also, the constitutional question is, if you are going to fight over it, when did it become a federal issue? Pretty soon it'll be a UN issue.
But it is, as long as there's something in the code about straight marriage, the only way to really have equality is to even up the score, because you're not going to take all those laws off the books, right?
Yeah, two wrongs don't make a right.
You did support the Defense of Marriage Act. Do you regret that support?
No, not really, mainly because I say if the government's ever involved, it has to be at the local level. And in that bill, I wasn't there when that was voted on, so I defended the principle that the federal government shouldn't come in and overrule and tell the states what to do. But that's on a generalized principle because I don't like federal mandates at all.
On the issue of guns, obviously a big push for gun control. As a libertarian Republican, I presume that you don't want any more laws having to do with guns.
Well, the laws should be designed to curtail violence and punish violence, so it's not like you don't have laws. It means how you use weapons and what you do. So if they're being used, if they're used to threaten, then governments have a responsibility. But I don't see you writing whole laws about registration and trying to figure out who's buying what when. I don't think they do much good.
Should anything be done in the wake of Newtown? Should there be any adjustment in terms of what we do on that score?
On which one? On
the issue of gun control, following what happened in Newtown, Connecticut, and the Great Push, is there any change in law you think we should have?
I'm surprised because when I listen to the talk and really a lot of hype on this, I thought this would intimidate everybody in Congress to rush and put on a lot of strong controls. So I would say that the conservative position on that seems to prevail. The one position I took on that afterwards, which got a little bit of attention, was, when it came out and the NRA said that they were advocating guards with guns all over campuses and all, and I didn't think that was a very great idea.
But expanded background checks would be a good idea, maybe?
I don't think they do any good.
Yeah. Right. You're breaking up. I think we're going to lose you in a minute here, but on Rand's filibuster, you proud of him?
Yeah, he did. He did a good job. He picked a good issue, and he reached a lot of people. And he has even admitted that the final letter that was sent to him had a few shortcomings on it. But it's great to be out there and talking about it. But I'd like everybody to start talking about, the use of drones overseas. I guess you saw that thing in Washington Post that said that, a large majority of Americans say, it's okay to use these missiles to shoot and kill suspects.
Yeah. Well, he was on the right side of the issue. We're just running out of time up against a hard break, but I'm really glad we got a hold of you tonight, Dr. Paul. Thanks so much for talking to us.